The following is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com. It is 2 minutes past 4 o'clock. You are tuned to 96.3 FM WLCN. It's time for the 4 p.m. 411. I'm Loyd Kirby, the marketing manager here at WLCN. And thank you for tuning in. We've got a half hour. We're going to talk basketball since it is Valentine's Day, but hopefully it's a day for a Valentine's Day massacre for the Lady Railers as they begin play in the regional tournament up in Bloomington High School against Rantoul. And we thought it would be fitting, since it is basketball season and there's been talk of the postseason, to have Lady Railer alum Jan Bowers with us. So, Jan, thank you for making the trip in and joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to give us a call, 217-648-5510. Or you can email your questions, 4pm411 at WLCNonline.com. I do want to make you aware that there will be no 4pm411 show next week or the week after. Those would be the 21st and the 28th due to basketball conflicts, or at least we hope basketball conflicts. So our next show will be March 7th when we will have Lincoln Mayor Tracy Welch with us. We also invite you to tune in to the Viewpoint show tomorrow with Bill Gossett. That's at 8:15 in the morning when Don Cavey, the Logan County Department of Public Health Administrator, will be with us. But as I mentioned, Jan Bowers is with us, and we're going to talk basketball. We're going to talk Jan Bowers. So it's been, you're aware, and I think people are aware from social media, that there's been sort of a awakening of the Lady Railer basketball alumni, as the current Lady Railer basketball team has gone through the regular season undefeated. I know there's a lot of people doing different things, a lot of different hands involved. I don't know if you're necessarily the spokesperson for it, but I've seen you post things on Facebook in groups, so like it or not, maybe you're sort of the public face for it. How exciting is it as a Lady Railer alum to see what the current team is doing?
It's just phenomenal. Lady Railer basketball has been around for a long time and had its ups and downs, and to see this team do what they're doing with no seniors on the team is really just unbelievable. My involvement in getting back to watch them play actually occurred because one of my former players, Aaron Smith, who moved back from California and contacted me and said, hey, let's go watch a Lady Railer game. Oh. And so I said, okay. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, why not try to get some other former players and my teammates to go? And so that's when I put out the first call on Facebook of let's get together and go watch a game. And that drew a few people, and then when they were playing the Peoria game, that was the time that I thought we really need to get a crowd in there, because what a difference it makes. Back when I was playing in high school, we didn't have big crowds until after we went to state, and then everybody was there and just electrified the gym and made us play harder. And so I thought we need to fill that gym, and so that's when we put out again, and I was just floored when we had over 40 Lady Railers show up. They just kept coming out of the stands. I had no idea there were that many there. And that was great, and there were more that were watching and listening. So, the team is fun to watch. Unfortunately, they've had a lot of blowout games, but that's because they're that good. Right. And so it's going to be exciting for them with the tournament. It's always different. Anything can happen in a tournament, but I think they're ready. I think they're ready for a run, and I think they've got focus. They know what job needs to be done, and I think I'm looking forward to them hopefully going all the way.
Sure, absolutely. So once again, Jan Bowers, our guest, 217-648-5510, talking Lady Railer basketball. You mentioned you've been to a few games. What is it that makes this team so good?
Well, I'll tell you, just like with the men's basketball team, their really go-to defense is that full court press. And I don't know who made the decision to put Chloe Froby at the point of that press, but that was absolutely brilliant. Her size, her length, her stretch, her pure athletic ability makes what she does in that point, that press is just, it's hard for teams to get through that. She's so aggressive up on top, and then she has the players behind her who have the quickness and they have the instinct. So I think where a lot of teams might be able to score in a half-court game, they have to get to the half-court game, and that's very difficult. So I think that press is really their key. Not only with Chloe playing in the full court press, but when it comes back and she's at the top of that 1-2-2, again, her size and length and reach and aggressiveness on top creates a lot of havoc. But also what it does is it allows her to go in and be the free rebounder. So in a 1-2-2, that usually puts the smaller guards who are up at the elbows. They're the ones that fall down on the weak side, and it's very difficult to rebound from there. But with Chloe playing the top and her natural instincts, she can move down and get some of those rebounds, and I think that's key. They have a lot of weapons. They can score in a lot of ways. They score off the defense, off of the press. They can drive. They have a lot of players that can penetrate and get the job done inside. They have so many different people that can score from the three-point. Even Piper Whiteman steps out and hits the three-point. How do you defend that when sometimes there's 4 and 5 players on the floor that can hit from three-point? I think getting Becca back is huge for them. I had not seen her play, and she has one of the nicest shots that I've seen. It's just a pure shot, and she can hit a pull-up jumper. She can drive and penetrate. They all read the floor very well and hit the gaps and can make the nice bounce pass when necessary to the open player. So I just think they have a lot of weapons, and I think that's why they're going to go so far. They're not one-dimensional by any means.
Okay. And so speaking of girls, Lady Railer basketball teams and state tournaments, you, of course, were a member of the team that made it. What was that experience like? You mentioned there weren't a whole lot of folks in attendance at your regular season games. As you moved through the state tournament and finally made it, what was that? What difference did it make to you as far as the crowds getting larger and larger, and how did that impact the team?
Well, throughout the regular season, we had the typical parents and the few fans that would come. And it's not that we didn't have a big crowd. We had a crowd, but it wasn't the crowd that it became. And that was nice. We didn't have much of a following for away games. Everybody always has a goal of going to the state tournament. Although the state tournament was new when we first came in. It was only, the year we went was the first year it was held at U of I.
Oh, okay.
It had always been held at Illinois State, and I want to say it was my freshman year or sophomore year was actually freshman year or 8th grade year was actually the first state tournament game.
Oh, wow.
So it had not, been in existence for very long. So I don't even know and think that we remembered thinking that state was a goal of ours. We knew the regional tournament was going to be difficult because we ran into Clinton. That's when they had Leslie Sass Spencer, who ended up being my teammate and Hall of Fame, both at Lincoln College and William Penn, where she went on and played a Kodak All-American. And we knew that was going to be a game. And fortunately, we came out on top. I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember who the sectional tournament games were. I could look them up. I've got my stuff here, but I don't remember. But I do know that when we got to the Limestone game, which was super sectional, which was held at the field house at Western Illinois University, that was the same night that the boys team was playing with Chuck Berderver, Joe Weingars, and that team, phenomenal team, Craig Howard and Perry Voiles and Brett Farmer, and I'm missing some, but that they were supposed to go to state,
right.
So they were playing the same night for a sectional game, and so of course all the Lincoln fans were there, and I don't blame them. So the few that we had in the stands were mostly the parents, and that day Coach Foltz took us out of school, took us over to Macomb. And he had somebody, I don't even know who we hooked up with, but there was a house, and we had 15 girls in there, and it was supposed to be relaxing. We went to lunch, and then we were supposed to take a nap. Nobody slept. Nobody slept. And leading into that super sectional game where we were down, and we struggled. We weren't playing well, and at halftime, I remember coming out and Pam Richhart and I talking and saying we are not going to lose this game. And Pam had a phenomenal second half. Barb had a phenomenal second half, and we were able to pull away and beat the team that we were not supposed to win. Limestone was favored to make it to the state tournament and do well in the state tournament. They had some very strong players. So at that time, then, we won, and the boys unfortunately lost. So off we go to state, and fortunately, everybody in the community came to Champaign and supported us.
Cool.
And that was just wonderful. So,
Yeah.
so it was electrifying, and knowing we had the crowd there, and they were all decked out in the Lincoln gear, and so it was very exciting to have those crowds. And then the following year, they stayed with us, which was wonderful. But it does make a difference.
Okay. And, of course, we're talking Lady Railer basketball. Lady Railers open their play in the postseason tournament tonight against Rantoul. That's at Bloomington High School at 6 p.m. WLCN will have the broadcast and live stream of that game. So if you can't make it in person, we, of course, encourage you to make it in person. But if you can't, feel free to tune in either by the radio or through the Mixler app or via YouTube. We're going to go ahead and take our first break, and we will be back in 2 minutes with more from Jan Bowers. Back on the 4 p.m. 411 with Jan Bowers. Once again, 217-648-5510, the number to call if you have a question or comment. And we are talking, of course, Lady Railer basketball. And now we're going to talk Jan Bowers and basketball. So obviously you had a storied playing career from Lincoln Community High School on up through Lincoln College and on up to ISU. Let's go back even further than that, though. How did you first get interested in basketball, and what made you, what was sort of your influence or motivation for getting involved?
My dad was a very good athlete himself, and was a fan of any sport. So
Okay.
I can remember being very young and going to every Railer basketball game, every Railer football game. I can remember watching Seymour Reed play, Norman Cook play. My brother and I, Phil, who was a year older than myself, we were very close growing up, and sports was all we did. So we would emulate the Lincoln Railers boys basketball team.
Okay.
And we would go down in the basement. We'd have laundry baskets set up at opposite ends of the basement, and we would dress in our Railer sweats. We'd
Okay.
have our pajamas on with the pajama pants and and then the tear off, and have our t-shirts underneath, and we would play basketball, and we would be the Railers, and I was either Mike Swingle or Mike Schneider. Those were the two
okay.
guards that that I remember that I thought were fantastic players. So that's when I was very young. So I loved going to the games. We would go to baseball games. I can remember going to Biddy basketball at Washington Monroe. So we didn't have girls basketball through the grade schools and junior high. I believe that West Lincoln and maybe Carroll Catholic and maybe Chester East might have had programs for the girls, but we did not. So it was not until, I believe, my 8th grade year or 7th grade year that the rec actually had a program for girls, and that was the first organized basketball that I had ever played. Now, I grew up in a neighborhood. I was very fortunate that I had a neighborhood of boys, several that we played every sport. We played football, we played basketball, we played baseball, we did it all. And I was very fortunate, again, to have that. My brother, who I said played, and he was the best in the neighborhood, and we had Raylor's Stan Warner and Ty Miller and Tad Powers and Kendall Hurley would play, and a whole group. And I grew up, Rob McDonald and Bruce Kelly and several others from the junior high or from the Northwest and so on. So even at junior high, all we had was volleyball and track. So it wasn't until my freshman year of high school that we actually had a basketball team that I was able to play on.
Okay. So we do have a caller. I think maybe we're having a little trouble with the audio on the YouTube, but we are recording this program. So if you are watching on YouTube, we apologize if there are some issues there. We will try and get those rectified. But I believe we have a caller now. So caller, if you're there, can you go ahead, please?
Hi, Loyd and Jan.
Hello. That's a familiar voice.
Well, our basket was, we cut out the bottom of a oatmeal cylinder and tape it over the doorway, but and ball up some paper and put tape around it. But Jan, remind Loyd about Title IX, and was it Mrs. McCullough and Mrs. Kinsey that got behind that to push Lady Rail Splitter basketball?
That was actually before my days at the high school. So the first group that came back and started playing had Cindy Slayton and Sean McCullough and Joni Comstock and Jan Smock at the time. I believe Mary Mitchell. I know Pam Knauer played. Pam Turner played. Pam Music. There were several of them. And that started, and Joe Viley actually had that team, I think, for 5 or 6 years. And they didn't have uniforms. They played in their PE gear with pennies on and traveled and played. They might have only had 8 games in a season, but they are the ones that got it going at Lincoln High School, and very fortunate that they did. Title IX certainly helped and brought forth more recognition for the girls in playing. We actually had Title IX at the high school because of some inconsistencies that were happening within the sports, and Coach Foltz, and bless his heart, recognized that and filed a Title IX complaint. And Title IX came in and interviewed at the high school, and we were able then to get a bigger budget and get better uniforms and travel expenses and things. And it's evolved since then, and thank goodness it did. But yes, it was that core group way back, and I apologize if I'm missing anybody. I know there's some other names that I should be saying of that group that started that development of the women's basketball back in the early 70s.
Okay, very
well,
good.
Thanks to Coach Biley. I think she coached all the Lady Rail Splitter sports. And, Jan, I remember you shooting from the top of the key, and they didn't have the three-point shots in. You would have added a few more points to your legacy if they would have had the three-point shot.
That's right. They did not have the three-point shot, and we played with the boys' basketball. We played with the bigger basketball. Now they have the smaller size basketball. So, yes, I believe that had they had a three-point line, it would have been a little bit different back in the day.
Yeah. So you and of course, you were Miss Inside, and Barb, you were Miss Outside, Barb was Inside. You grew up playing with men and boys. So when you got to high school, it seemed a little bit easier.
It did. Didn't really know what to expect in getting there. And I know, Barb also grew up playing with the boys, and Gail McRoberts grew up playing with the boys, and Pam Alsop and Pam Richhart. We didn't have anything else, so that's what we did. And I think that's what allowed us to play a little bit more aggressive, was the fact that we had always played against boys, so we didn't know any different. So playing with the girls, I certainly loved it, and what I appreciate most, and I've said this before about Coach Foltz, is he did not treat us as girls playing basketball. He treated us as ball players, as athletes playing basketball. And so he taught us and expected us to play the same as if he were coaching boys, and I appreciate that, and I think that's why we had the success that we did, is because he treated us like ball players.
Yeah, you were fortunate to have Coach Foltz. I know I grew up with him, and he was a great athlete himself.
Absolutely. He would get out and scrimmage with us, and we learned a lot from just watching him play. Some of the things he did on defense, some of the moves he made on offense, the different types of shots, the different types of passes. That took us to another level, again, just watching and seeing what he could do. He'd have us play against the boys. This is where we would bring in the freshman boys, and that's who we scrimmaged against. And they can't do that anymore. That's no longer allowed.
Okay.
But that was huge for us. It's hard when you have a core varsity to find 5 more players that can challenge you.
Right.
Nothing against the other players, but it's just hard to do that. So we would bring in the freshman boys. That's when Coach Welch was coaching the freshman team, and he would bring in, it could be the B or C team. But, they could jump higher than we could. They were faster than we were. So even though they weren't the top freshman boys, they were enough to give us competition and allow us to get better ourselves.
Jen, you had some great teammates, some great athletes. They held the 100, the 200, the 400, the 2 mile in track and field. And one of my favorite comments, I think you probably got the same tape, is when the color guy that for the IHSA, when you guys finished second stage, he said, well, that's not too bad out of 602 teams. That was one class.
Yes.
One of my favorite comments.
Exactly. And, that's a difference. There was only one class at that time. We didn't have, 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A for the smaller schools. And so we were going up against schools that had many more, people and so more athletes and seasoned athletes. So you're right. The fact that we got second out of 600 and some schools was we were, to be honest with you, I was heartbroken when we got second. I felt like we let Lincoln down, and we did not, of course, but that's how I felt, because once we got to state, we and we won that first game, then we expected to win. And
that exciting Crystal Lake game, you won by 1 point there, and then they can still consider in that too, and that's their greatest lady team ever, and you guys completely wiped them out.
We did that, and the thing was, when we played them in the regular season and we won by 1 point on a last-second shot, they didn't have their top guard at that time. Nancy Sagesser was not there, and so when we met them for the the quarterfinal round there at state, and they had her back, they were convinced that they were going to win that game. And I can remember in the tunnel before just being pumped up for that game. And we did. We came out and just put it to them and won by over 20. And that's where Barb scored. That was Barb's birthday, and she scored 28 points and set the record at the time for the most points scored.
And 22 rebounds.
Exactly. And we just took it to them. Now, that was also when we played on a Friday night, and then we played 2 games on Saturday. So by the time we had played that game and expended a lot of energy against Mattoon, because that was our big rival, that was Big 12.
Right.
So we really wanted to beat them. I think maybe we had worn ourselves out a little bit. We had a great first half against Joliet West, but second half I think we ran out of gas, and they were just a good team. They were very deep.
They had one of the greatest lady players of all time in IHSA history too.
Yeah, absolutely. Kathy Boswell, who then became my teammate at Illinois State University and one of my dear friends, but she was just a sophomore at the time, if you remember, with the braided pigtails, and she was a phenomenal player. But they had a front line that was very tall, and then they had a great guard as well, and so they were very deep. they were a good team. I'm not going to take anything away from them.
Sure.
Give us a different day, and we might have beat them 2 out of 3 games, and they might have beat us 2 out of 3 games. But I think in 3 games we would have beat them at least once. I do believe that.
At this point, I better be quiet. Lloyd probably gets tired of me talking during football season. I'll let him take it the rest of the way.
I love talking with you.
Yeah, you're fine, Bob. So that's the way we like it, baby.
That's right.
But we do have sponsors. We do need to take a break, so we'll go ahead and do that. And we'll be back with more with Jan Bowers.
If you're an ally of this community, speak out. There are more of us together than apart, and so they need you to stand with them.
And we are back for a few minutes on the 4 p.m. 411. Our guest has been Jan Bowers. Once again, if you have a quick comment or question, 217-648-5510. We will have no show for the next 2 weeks as we will be traveling across central Illinois to cover Lady Railer and Railer boys basketball. I wanted to ask you, Jan, before you go, we talked about your team going to state. We're talking about the perfect season of this team with certainly a deep run in the postseason in their sights. How do you think your team would fare against the current team?
Well, it's a different era. Both teams relied heavily on press, so we had a 2-2-1 press that was kind of our bread and butter as well as their press.
Okay.
They have phenomenal guards. We had phenomenal guards. We scored in different ways. As Bob said, we had. Barb is Miss Inside. I was considered Miss Outside. But we also had Pam Richhart, who was a major force underneath the basket, as well as Stacy Cook, who came in and a major force underneath. Barb's scoring occurred, 15-foot range. She was more the floater inside and could just catch and turn and shoot quicker than a defense could realize she was going to do it. So we had a lot of ways to score, just as they do. They rely a lot on the outside shot and a lot on penetrating, and we did the same and had the players that could step in the gaps. We had very strong rebounding with Pam Richhart and Barbara Derber and Stacy Cook, and I think that's a concern. I know it has been of their team all season long. Is it's hard for them to rebound because they're not as tall. I think Chloe's one of their tallest players, and they have and I can't think of the girl's name, number 24, who comes in, who's tall, and Piper's a little tall, but they don't quite have that big height. I can't say who would win the game, but I tell you, it would have been a blast to play. I would have loved to seen that game. Again, they have ball handlers. We had ball handlers. They like to run. We like to run. I think it would have been phenomenal. And don't take away from Steph Reichley, Angie Bossingham, Kelsey Bruce, Michelle Young, and that group, because they also went to state, and that team was also loaded. And I don't know if everybody knows of the big showdown that's supposed to happen with Chloe and Steph. Are you aware of that? March, I believe, March
No.
13th on a Monday night. They're planning, if the IHSA approves it, a one-on-one game between Steph and Chloe.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Huh.
so that ought to be interesting.
All
But,
right.
people always said, well, how would that team have fared and this team and that team? And, to get to state tournament, you have to have strengths.
Sure.
And all of the teams did. So I'm just thrilled to death that this team is doing what they're doing, and it's their era, it's their time, and I hope that they can do it too. We also, my senior year, were undefeated in the regular season.
Okay.
Our senior year, which I think we were even stronger. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the state tournament, had some unfortunate things, but we were also undefeated at that time.
Oh, wow.
And that's not an easy thing to do. So I don't know if there were any other undefeated teams in the history of Lady Railers, but I know of those two.
Okay.
So congratulations to them for breaking that record.
Sure, absolutely.
And good luck to them for sure.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the Lady Railers open play tonight, 6 p.m. WLCN will be there. We will have radio coverage as well as you can listen to the audio on the Mixler app if you are away from our listening area. And we will have the live stream on YouTube, so feel free to tune in that way. We have run out of time, so you brought your scrapbooks and your papers, and we didn't really get to much of them. So maybe we'll have you on the cheap seats some
Sure,
Saturday morning.
absolutely,
So, all right.
absolutely.
So our guest has been Jan Bowers talking Lady Railer basketball. Once again, we won't have a program the next 2 weeks due to basketball coverage, so we will be back on the air March 7th with Mayor Tracy Welch. Tune in tomorrow to the Viewpoint program with Bill Gossett as he welcomes Don Cavey, the Logan County Department of Public Health Administrator. But for now, this is Loyd Kirby for the 4 p.m. 411. Thank you for listening. The preceding program is a presentation of WLCN 96.3 FM and WLCNonline.com.